Poštovani koleški kolegi, dragi ljubitelji, cijeniti studenti, gosti od SAT. Ima je osobna čest da vi ga predstavljam današnji naš gostin, docent dr. Craig Hansen, koji je od Brigham State University do Roma Juta, SAT. Kao što znate, Matemoslovno naučno udruženje za sigurno svoja kontinuirana edukacija. Do svojega programa često patnik ima vakite gostovanje, je tega naše zadovoljstvo je moj drag prijatelj, Craig Hansen, kako što imame istraživanje v posljednje mesec dela, koje što traje nekada do početka godini, je iskoristiti ta možnost da go pokažeme, da klik, se već samo prevedem, imamo možnost da pokažeme, da prezentira. Dneska imamo dve predavanja, koji što jedno to je tako za poširok auditorium, a vtoro će bude za pomog krug, to samo za naši doktoranti, magistranti i članovi družine, gdje je neko poznačen interes defektoloških ovih istraživačkih. Da vi go predstavljam docent dr. Craig Hansen, to je asistent profesor i docent po našoj na Brigham State University, specijalist za specijalna edukacija i ABA, znači ima certifikat ABA tehnika, no za ABA nekaj drug eventualen projekt. To je avtor na Logovenju trudu i jedan od recenzentnih da spisali je to defektološka teorija praktike i Journal of Special Education, koje što ja сега koristim ova prilika da mu podaram двата последни примероци и така всушност ние се запознахме по имейл, каде што јас го замолив да биде рецензентом најљубезно прихвати тоа како што нашите станови на година. Thank you, Sister Ruth. Thank you for your support, the journal, and also the science and society. Јас нема да можам повеќе, сметам дека времето ќе го пропуштиме време. Тоа што треба да презентира на скрината, односно на мониторот имате проценка и третба на нарушување, однесување кај лица со аутизам и развојни нарушувања. Значи, тој е специјалист за третирање на предизвикувачко однесување. Тоа има прилика 18 родители во последните 3 дена да го видат. Така што ќе биде неговото предавање насочено по тоа. После предавањето е предвидена дискусија, слободно ќе можете да ги поставите вашите прашања и предвидена е некаде 2 часа до 12 да завршиме курсот и сега нема да е толку стрикни. Од мене толку, ќе го давам сега на доктор Craig Hansen да почне со предавањето и да го запознае со нашето.
Thank you very much. I am going to speak in English today. But before I begin, I usually like to know who my audience is. Okay, so if you are a special education teacher, please raise your hand. If you're a psychologist, please raise your hand. If you're a speech therapist, logopedist, okay, good. Who else do we have here today?
Parents.
Parents. Oh, if you're a parent, please raise your hand. Okay. Okay, welcome. Thank you. So today the talk is going to be a little bit of a mixture between technical terms and practical use. And so for the beginning, I'm going to talk to you, and then we'll have some time for interaction. And in the middle, we're going to have a little bit of time to practice some of what I'm talking about. Okay, so what we're going to learn about today is functional behavior assessment. And this is the primary assessment that we use in applied behavior analysis, in ABA, on how to assess and treat challenging behavior. And then we're going to learn about some interventions, some treatments that are aligned with functional behavior assessment results. So, some of you that have already attended some of my talks before know that behaviors have form and they have function. Just like this chair has a form, it's red, it's black, this chair has a form, but it also has a function. The function is to sit in this chair. Okay? Behavior is the same way. Behavior has a purpose behind it. So function refers to what is the purpose of the behavior. Okay? Because all behaviors ultimately have a purpose that's rooted in the environment, whether it's in the child's previous experience in their environment or in the immediate environment where the child is behaving. Okay, so function then is important because if the child engages in a challenging behavior for a specific purpose, any treatment needs to be aligned with that purpose. It needs to meet that need that the child is communicating. So form, for example, here's a list of challenging behaviors. Aggression, for example, so hitting, kicking, biting. Disruptive behaviors, making noise, yelling. Non-compliance, which is one of the most common problem behaviors in children with disabilities. So not following directions when you're supposed to be working. Self-injurious behaviors, they're one of the most significant and severe behaviors that educators and therapists deal with. Stereotypy, again, very common. It's almost rooted in the diagnosis of autism. And then pica, eating things that are not food. Okay? Then elopement, meaning running away from the classroom, running away from a teaching situation. It's a very common yet very dangerous behavior. It's one of the few behaviors, along with pica, that can be treated with behavior treatments that is actually life-threatening. Because if a child runs out in the street and gets hit by a car, a child runs in and falls in a river, or any other of the dangerous situations that a child can get into when they run away from their parents or from learning situations. Function, on the other hand, can be aligned with any of the forms of behavior. And what we look at when we look at function of behavior, we look at, we consider whether or not a behavior is maintained by adult attention. Does the parent attend to the child's behavior that they shouldn't attend to, meaning the problematic behaviors too often? Or do the other peers pay attention to the child's bad behaviors more than they should? Perhaps the most common in school situations is escape and avoidance. And what that means, they're escaping or avoiding work situations. So when a work demand is placed on a child to do an assignment, to do something that's lower preference, escape maintain behaviors mean that the child's behavior provides them the opportunity to get a break even though it's maladaptive. Okay, so going back to the previous slide, can we go back one? So when we start thinking about escape and attention, an example in aggression, for example, for attention, is that the child will start engaging in aggressive behaviors because it produces the mom's attention or the peer's attention. Okay? There's a lot of problems in the United States. It's a very common theme right now on bullying. Okay? Do we understand the term bullying? It means when a child mistreats another child. And it happens quite frequently with children with higher functioning autism who are in inclusive environments, to the point that there are a lot of policy changes being put in place and treatments being put in place to prevent bullying of children on the autism spectrum. Because in the last 2-3 years, there have been some school shootings in America that were involved with children on the autism spectrum who had been bullied throughout their school years. Okay. And so aggression then can take different forms. It can take that. So in relational aggression, for instance, there can be a lot of attention from peers. They might want to look like they're the boss of the playground, for example, and they get a lot of attention from peers for being aggressive. Or let's take non-compliance, for example. Sometimes children with Down syndrome will say no just to say no, even though they comply, physically comply. Have we seen this before? So a lot of children with Down syndrome, one of their favorite words is to say no, even though they end up following through. So that can be an attention type of behavior, but it can also be in some children with Down syndrome or autism or any of the other developmental disabilities with whom we work, a form of escape from work demands. Okay. Self-injurious behaviors, on the other hand, get a little bit more complex, and so I'm going to advance again to the function part and talk about self-stimulation. So in self-stimulatory behaviors, self-injurious behaviors can sometimes be a form of self-stimulatory behavior, but not always. For instance, if the behavior of self-injurious behaviors, if the child is hitting him or herself, or hitting his head on the table or on the floor or on the wall, it can reduce anxiety or pain, or it can also provide sensations that are positive for the individual to enrich their own environment, which is very maladaptive, but it happens that way sometimes. But it can also be to elicit attention. Okay? It can also be to get out of work demands. In fact, most often I see self-injurious behaviors. It has to do when the parent or the therapist or teacher is telling the child to do something they don't want to do. And they start engaging in those self-injurious behaviors, self-auto-aggressive behaviors to get to a point. So then the final one that we consider is access to tangible items. So the child learns, for instance, that every time I do this behavior, aggressive behavior, non-compliance, I gain access to a preferred activity. Okay, I see it all the time in schools where teachers have learned what their limits are with the child, and the child will start to get upset, maybe even start to throw items on the floor, and the teacher ends the activity right away. Okay? And then the child gets a preferred activity because to calm them down. But the problem with doing that is that you've reinforced that behavior. You've reinforced the non-compliance, the property destruction, the minute you start to take it away when the child gets upset. So this is based on two principles in ABA, positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. And there's sometimes a confusion about the meaning with positive reinforcement. Sorry, I'm standing in front of this. There's sometimes confusion about the meaning of positive reinforcement. Positive reinforcement doesn't always mean that you're strengthening a good behavior. It can be any behavior. So there can be positive reinforcement for bad behaviors. So for aggression, for any of the behaviors that we listed, there's a lot of positive reinforcement that's going into that. For instance, if a child with Prader-Willi syndrome, are you familiar with Prader-Willi syndrome? Where they have hyperphagia and they like to eat a lot. It starts biting his or her arm. Okay? And every time they start biting their arm, the parent provides them food. That's how positive reinforcement worked for that child. That child's arm biting was reinforced through the means of positive reinforcement. When frequently we use that term to talk about giving compliments to children, to praising children, because that increases good behaviors, it also works for the other side too. It also works for bad behaviors. Because these principles were discovered with rats and pigeons in laboratories in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s in America at Harvard University, from B.F. Skinner. And the rat pressing the bar being reinforced for the behavior by means of positive reinforcement increased bar pressing. Bar pressing is not a functional behavior of any kind, but the purpose for the rat to press the lever was to receive the food. But it was discovered that individuals with developmental disabilities started to engage in challenging behaviors because they received positive reinforcement for those challenging behaviors. Let's take an example right here. So Ivanka is bored and starts yelling loud until her mother comes to her side. Ivanka is more likely to yell in the future because it elicits her mother's attention. Negative reinforcement, on the other hand, is a consequence that increases behavior through the termination of an undesired stimulus. So, for example, every time a mother yells at Johann to work, he smashes a dish on the ground, the mom stops asking him what to do. So, for example, if he is cleaning, or if mom's trying to tell him to clean the plate, he takes the plate and smashes it on the ground. He's terminated that work demand. He's terminated that stimulus, and that behavior now has been reinforced if the mom doesn't keep asking him to do it. Okay? So his mother telling him to work is an undesired stimulus, and smashing the plate on the ground it is his way of stopping her from asking in the future. So she's less likely. And what ends up happening with these children? What I frequently see is that there's an unwritten agreement between mom and child that if mom doesn't ask a child what to do, or a teacher doesn't ask a child what to do, child doesn't misbehave. And so the children end up sitting in their room all day, doing whatever they want all day long because they have this unwritten agreement between mother and child or teacher and child that they don't have to do anything because they will not become aggressive. And so that behavior has been so embedded and reinforced that we've created a non-functional adult. An adult that has so many problems, will never work, will never be self-sufficient, they'll always have to be taken care of by others. So that's how these forms of reinforcement strengthen and maintain undesirable behaviors. And the way that we assess them, we call them ABC assessments. Okay, is this the same in English? So as you know, in English in the alphabet, it's A, B, C. It's a lot easier for us to remember, but they have a specific meaning. So in English, the antecedent is what occurs immediately before a behavior occurs. Okay? It's the events in the environment, or the events within the person, but those are much harder to access. We'll talk about some of those in a second. They're much harder to observe what goes on inside the person. Okay? So behavior is the specific behavior that we're watching, that the child does, or the person does, that is observable. Okay? We can't observe feelings very easily from sitting across the classroom, for instance. Or we can't observe their thoughts. We don't know what the child is thinking. We can only observe what we can see on the outside of the person. Then the consequence is what immediately follows the behavior. It's the things in the environment that occur that end up eventually reinforcing that behavior. So antecedents, here are some examples. Okay? So there's a special type of antecedent that is less observable to us. So this is the one I'll talk about first. And these are the major ones: hunger, thirst, fatigue, pain, for instance, or discomfort. So as we know, within autism, you have many children who have different health problems, problems in stomach, or headaches. If a child is nonverbal, for instance, they cannot communicate that they have a headache very easily, other than behavior. Okay? Or tooth pain. If their teeth hurt, if they're getting cavities, if they're having tooth pain in general, it's hard to know in a child with a disability. They have to visit a dentist to find out if the dentist has the skills to assess that in a child with special needs. Stomach and bowel pain. In adolescent girls, if they have painful menstrual cycles, for instance, that can be another antecedent or setting event for challenging behavior because they're communicating that discomfort. Immediate antecedents, on the other hand, okay, these are the things that occur immediately before the behavior. So those previous ones were long-term. And did I mention sleep on the previous one? Sleep disorders are very prevalent in autism spectrum disorder. And that's always a setting event for the challenging behaviors. So let's move on then to the immediate antecedents. Are we okay? So if the person, for instance, is being ignored by staff members, if an individual, if a child in a residential setting, for instance, is playing by themselves or is doing a vocational class, and they're being ignored by others around them, they may start engaging in a challenging behavior or in a disruptive behavior that draws the attention of the people around them. And so that means that that behavior gets reinforced, and they're more likely to start engaging in that behavior in the future because that draws everyone around them. Okay, that gets everyone to come along. And it's hard to see this when you're involved in the moment and when you're, for instance, a parent has a hard time seeing what they're doing exactly when they start prompting and motivating these behaviors. Or even teachers, I see this all the time. Or toys. If the child or individual's preferred toy is denied, that can be an immediate antecedent to challenging behaviors. Or if requests are denied. If the child requests something appropriately and they've learned that I can ask for water and get it every time I ask for it, and for some reason this time it's not working. And so that would prompt or motivate the challenging behavior. Okay? Or being prompted to work, as in those escape maintain behaviors. When the child is prompted to work, that's usually an antecedent to the challenging behavior, the non-compliance, or any other of the forms of behavior that we've talked about. Being provoked by a peer. So if a child is being bullied or treated poorly by a peer, or there's a fight on the playground immediately before, that can be an antecedent for challenging behavior as well. So behaviors, like I said, these are observable. These are measurable. Behaviors that we can count. Usually we know that a behavior is something that we call passes. A behavior passes the dead man's test. Okay? A dead man's test means a behavior is anything that a dead man cannot do. So if a man is dead, he cannot move, he cannot raise his arms, he cannot shake his head. So that means it's a behavior. He cannot grind his teeth. He cannot hit himself. Okay? So we like to find behaviors that are easy to count. I can count how many times or with what intensity a girl hits herself or a man hits himself. Okay? But it's a lot harder to count how many times they have invasive thoughts, for instance. Okay? So consequences then, these are the immediate consequences. Just like there's immediate antecedents, there's also immediate consequences. The first one again, attention. And this often looks like the the parents or the people around them try and block the child from doing what they're doing. That's a form of attention. And so it's really important if a child who engages in self-injurious behaviors, you have to stop them from doing it, but you have to reduce the amount of attention you're providing to it. So you do it in a more nonchalant way. So for instance, if a person's hitting themselves, you can gently stop them from doing it, and then maybe redirect them to a task without using lots of, oh no, don't do this, you're going to hurt yourself. If you use too much verbiage, you have just strengthened that behavior through providing attention. So redirecting to another area or activity. So for example, if a child starts to become non-compliant when the teacher's telling them to write their name, and the teacher says, okay, fine, don't do this, just build with your favorite toy. Just go play with your favorite toy right now. That would be an escape type of function, where the child is redirected to another activity. So materials, toys, or food given to an individual. For instance, if they use maladaptive communication skills and they still receive what they're asking for in a maladaptive way, then it's a tangible function. It's an accessing a preferred item. And sometimes there's no observed consequences, and that's where we start saying this is a true self-stimulatory behavior. If you can put a child alone in a room and he rocks back and forth or engages in stereotypic behaviors, for instance, then you can't really see what the consequence is. And so we hypothesize that after repeated observations that this is in fact a self-stimulatory behavior, as the behavior itself is automatically reinforced. Okay, so let's practice. Let's look at how we do this. So what happens, and this is mandated by federal law. In the United States, the federal law that governs special education comes from the federal government in Washington, D.C. Okay, it's called the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act. Okay, it's the law that governs special education. And it has to get renewed every so often, every 5 or 10 years. And in 1997, when it was renewed, there came a requirement to do functional behavior assessments. And so the predominant form of behavior assessment that we use are these ABC recordings. And it does a pretty good job. It has some validity when observed for an extensive period of time. Okay? You can get a drink of water. Oh, thank you. I'm drying off a little more shirt. Okay. And the way that you set up a sheet like this, you can just do it, you can write it on a piece of paper or whatever. And the things you're going to want to know is when the behavior happens. It's really important to know when the behavior happens, because if it's a specific activity every single day where the child starts to do the behavior, then you'll know we need to put an intervention or a treatment in place during this time period. Okay? It also helps understanding the frequency of behavior. It isn't uncommon to talk to a teacher, for me to talk to a teacher and they tell me, well, the child does this behavior all the time. He always does this behavior. And then when you start to ask more questions about it,